some flour in the in my old crock pot inside. If you ever have those are fun to hold on to. All right, so then I'm putting 1.5 tablespoons of yeast in this little, like, in the flour. I made like a little here. I'm going to show you. Rotate device. It's okay. See? All right, here. So like a little, I call it like a volcano right there, like you do with your mashed potatoes. And so I'm putting the yeast in the center. I still owe it like a teaspoon and a half of yeast. We're gonna go there again. Gets a little feisty. That's me shaking it, but what? I don't know. Anyways, I'd share the flying yeast. I think I put a little too much yeast in there, but a little yeasty bread. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything if it tastes a little. If you ask me, I know there's probably some good research in Orange County where she was in the Newport Beach area. She had a little restaurant. People would line up around the. Now she had very arthritic hands, and so mainly from here down, like her hair. And anyways, in South Dakota, she was like maybe a 18 or 19-year-old married wife, and she was pregnant, and she was cooking. And made me macaroni and cheese that day for lunch, and it was the most horrible macaroni and cheese ever. But I remember thinking that she looked like she was trying so hard to be a mom. I pretend to like it. Women try to cook out there. Like I said, they might not be the best at it, but they give it a shot with their heart in it, at least. But it was because they liked it. Anyways, she was so happy about it. And I was like, well, she's going to have a baby. She's trying to be a good mom. And I remember thinking this, like the macaroni and cheese. And it never occurred to me that I'd ever have to go back to her house again, Because I actually bake stuff here. So my grandmother showed me how to bake bread. And I remember her hands were so arthritic. She didn't make bread by hand anymore by then. Because, like, I have these little tiny hands. My grandma had these, like, I don't want to say manly hands because I thought they were quite graceful, but really long, but bony, strong, longer fingered hands. Also, still, she's got to go on a chain. When she's out there on her chain, it's just my son stuff. She makes a lot of them. I know she should make a lot of noise with it, but she's like a full escape artist, and when she gets in this movie channel, we'll see. So we've got this, while the yeast and the milk were sitting in here, I went outside because it needed like about a half an hour to rise and get foamy, or 10 minutes, or I don't know what, but I just wait till it looks right. Depends on the temperature in the house. I live at a high altitude. Axe bakes and does everything just a little different here, okay? We're almost at, 7,000 feet. So almost. So it's, food does act different. So while I put the yeast and the milk in here and waited, what I did is I went out and I fed the rabbits, and I gathered some firewood because you got to find something to do, right? And you can come back, and here it is. So let's see. Oh, that's right. Okay, so I figured. Oopsie. Well, I made a little mistake here. I put too many eggs in the bowl. I'm gonna have to take an egg out. It's only supposed to be 3 eggs. So, anyways, what I'm doing is I'm taking the remaining milk, which is 2 cups of milk, 3 eggs, and about a tablespoon and a half of salt. So we're just gonna do that. Here's our. Trying to get my internet. Can I probably end the live stream just because I'm getting tired of trying to move the camera around. Let me see if I can set it. I don't know. All right, maybe right here. Maybe. Camera in a box. Well, there we go. That isn't just a pain. All right. Well, that works, doesn't it? So maybe the internet will stay on. Who knows? Now I need to add some oil. I forgot that altogether. I'm just going to use some regular old vegetable oil. I think every single thing I've added so far has been generic. And I think it's a fourth of a cup. And once again, I kind of do these measurements that aren't really truly measurements. This one, I believe, is about a third of a cup, this thing, so I'm just going to fill it up most of the way, but not all the way. Close enough. Now, my grandmother was a much better cook than me, by far. More professional. She was very like, she had a lot of like health and safety rules for the kitchen. Like, she didn't like anybody's hair being down in there. If you were younger and you came in even the dining room and you happened to even go to the bookshelf and set a brush down in the same room, no, that was not okay. And let's see if I can adjust this a little tiny bit there. So, at any rate, good to remember family, you know. And so I was thinking these little loaves, you know, I could hand them out. I don't know. Who knows? I have some neighbors that I think will enjoy the bread. And that's just something I like to do ever since I was a pastor's wife in the ministry back in the day, is bake things and hand them out. So, all right. Okay. So we're going to just mix this all up, just a little bit at a time. I don't even think the setup I have here is going to accommodate fully this amount of bread. This is supposed to make like 4 loaves, and I don't think these are big. These are big loaves, and so I can make like, I could probably make 12 like, you know, like loaves the size of a couple fists, you know, like little kind of 2-person loaves. So here we go. We'll shrink down a little bit. So I never really was the best at, I always have really liked to do it. Now I can make things that are really good, but I remember when I was little, there was a time when my grandmother had birthday, and so I wanted to bake her a cake. I don't know, I was 9 years old, I think, and I was using her kitchen, so let that be known, because that's just that alone, that she left me alone in her kitchen for 2 hours or 3 hours. She went off and had lunch, I think, with my grandfather, and there were adults in the house and everything, but I was allowed to have the whole kitchen. It was kind of a big deal. And so I was trying to be creative, and sometimes when I don't go by recipes, things can go terribly wrong. And the cake came out in green, dirty candle. It was not a nice color. It's kind of a funny color of green too. And I had gotten the color the way I wanted it. It was kind of a bluish green, and then something happened, and I kept trying to adjust it to make it the right color, and it just wasn't working. So as I add this wet mixture, this stuff is going to get like stickier and harder to handle. I think it's good for the old biceps though, like get in there and just use your hands. I washed them really good earlier, which is kind of a thing, but it's nice to be able to actually just touch it and get angry with it if you want. You can love it, but in a sort of a firm way. And so that's the fun of the baking of the bread. So an interesting thing is, how generations change from generation to generation. I remember how interested we were in cooking. And I remember that my own daughter, I had read her, this Little House on the Prairie books. And those take place, by the way, in the same area, in the same places, where a lot of them were places that I played and lived. I mean, not like exactly her spot, but the same area. And so I always would, when I was growing up, you watch those Little House on the Prairie things and stuff. And then when I got older, I read the books, and I read them all to my daughter when she was younger. And for a couple of years, actually, because of all my kids were younger, I used to have 6 kids. Well, I had a son who passed away. I had a foster son, and then I have 3 sons and then my daughter. And so I would read these Little House on the Prairie books, and I would take, maybe a month or a month and a half, 2 months on a book, but I would time it throughout the year so that we would land on the times of year that were in the books during that time of year as much as possible, which was kind of nice, And so I would read them to my kids. And, oh, I was clever because I was nursing throw a blanket over me and then read a book at the same time to the other kids. I mean, I would find ways to multitask within multitasking, and I like reading books too. But I remember when my daughter got to be about like, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old, and she gets really mad at me. And she says, I don't want to hear those books anymore. I'm not Laura Ingalls. I do not live on a prairie, and I'm done. So I was like, okay. It's just a difference of generations. It's like my mom, I wanted to live up the little house in the prairie life. She wanted to move back to California. And it's funny because I wanted to go out to the country. And then my daughter was like, wants a little more of a city life. And these things happen, things go back and forth. Okay, so this happens. You get the scary hands. And my dough is a little string, it's got some strings. It's a little too dry right now. We need to add more admix. I clean the counter actually really good before I do this, but that way I like to be able to just pick it up and throw it down on the counter. I know people like to use cutting boards and whatnot, but I clean it as well as a dish when I go to do this. I think you're throw a job without any chemicals on it. Anyways, this dough is way too a little distracted with the talking. This will never be a cooking channel, just only for today. I almost did a plumbing video on here just to document for somebody else how to fix a leaky bathroom, bathtub faucet, but the internet just kept going offline. Ironically, the boys, my sons like to cook. They like to cook, and boy, it's fun. We're gonna grab this flour and we're just gonna put it right in because now it's a little too wet. So once I get it to where I kind of like it, I'm gonna pull it back out and throw it on the counter. So let's see here. Still giving me a few problems, But basically, I want to get it to the stage where it's going to start rising for a walk while it's rising. And get a little exercise. I think we tend to forget, and I try not to forget, but the exercise is so good for the brain. And on that note, I might as well go on a tangent. My mother is a school teacher, and I don't know, I think she's still substituting, but she was for 25 years, and she did retire, but then she went back and taught again. She still does that off and on. So, they back in the President Bush No Child Left Behind days, right? They had this situation where if a school had scores that fell below a certain level, the government would put them on a blacklist. And so the schools got penalized across the board, just depending on however the kids tested, without regard to district, neighborhood, socioeconomic status, just nothing else was taken into consideration. So my mother was teaching at that time in a neighborhood in Desert Hot Springs where it's like the methamphetamine. It was at one point methamphetamine capital of like the United States, or California, which is just as good as the United States. And what happened is the kids had a lot of kids with fetal alcohol syndrome, kids that had been born with just mental deficiencies from their parents their mothers using drugs. And I think even the fathers using it, well, there causes a little funkiness in there. It causes problems. And so the kids just weren't, they needed individual attention. Every kid, you have classes of 30 kids. They're all at a different level and where they're learning. When we were younger, my sister, myself, my brothers even, my stepdad, all at various times went and would volunteer in the classroom. They used to let you do that quite a bit. Now they're more funny about it. But we used to just be able to go in there and help out. So what they did is President Bush put these classes on this whole school in Desert Hot Springs on the blacklist, the president's blacklist. And what the deal was is they had like 3 years or 4 years, something like that, to bring the test scores up. Every year they would test the kids intensively to see where they were at, to see how much the school had improved, and even sometimes It seemed like they did some set testing every semester during this blacklist phase. And these poor kids, every teacher had to go on a schedule during the blacklisting until they pulled the scores out of the gutter, which I don't think ever happened. The president changed and the law changed and they ended up not. But it went from teachers being able to spend individual time with the students to the government coming in and monitoring the classes and saying you can't teach above grade level or below grade level, not even walking up to a student and helping them out with something. So that means every single child has to be within 1 week of their exact age. So if you're in the third year of school, third grade, second month, third day, you have to be on schedule within they'll come in and if you weren't, they would come in and observe. And if the teacher wasn't at that time of the day on that exact spot, which leaves no leeway, right? Then they would get marked off and teachers would get in trouble. So they would find the teacher that did the best at this, and then that teacher would get I want to call it kickbacks, but they would get favor and they would look more important, I guess, would be the main thing in front of everybody else. And it was horrible. And we removed everything that was not math, English, reading, or something else. So they took out PE, they took out art for these poor kids, have fetal alcohol syndrome and drug babies that have ADHD, and they have to move around more. They have to move around more or they feel crazy. Or their chemistry, their brain chemistry isn't straightened out right. And studies have shown that kids who skip PE do not learn as well. They don't score as high. And that's because when you run around outside, you get more oxygen in your brain, right? So these poor kids had their art taken away, their PE taken away by the government. Down in Desert Hot Springs, next to Palm Springs, California, within 15 minutes of Palm Springs. Years. And it was the whole, I think that it's a smaller town, and about a third of the kids went to that school, and that whole town suffered for it because those kids, they started bringing, my mom had a kid threaten to bring a gun to school because she called the parent over something that had happened that had to be in class, and told all the other kids on the way to school because they were, it just went berserker. Anyways, so exercise is just for kids, especially. They say boys don't even develop skills on par with girls, start developing them, and their brains aren't even made to do it until they're 7, 8 years old. They shouldn't really even start boys in kindergarten until they're 6. But so kids with ADHD, boys, girls who are just a little more like me, I was like the boys. I needed that, they need it more even, and the real delicate little girls, their brains are a little different. But even it's not good for boys to make them sit there and do fine motor skills at a certain age. You do a little bit of it, and then you get them out and you let them run around. And you do object lessons and you do things that help drive the message home a little bit differently, because you'll drive them crazy and they won't do as well on anything. All right, so we're coming along here. I'm going to take it and back up and just use your muscles. And it seems silly, but if you're having any kind of mental, your mind feels like it's been stretched or a little raw, just get in there and just that have words. That's what I'll do. I'll just drive it straight out. I will try to zen it out and become the piece of dough in my hand. No joke. It's very therapeutic. I guess it's why those kids use that putty, that they sell now. That I guess you could just make at home, but they really have some interesting colors and sparkles and things they put in them at the store. So it's not that expensive either. It's needing a little bit more kneading, but it just doesn't feel. Yeah, and I'm not. Okay, let's try it in here. My technique's lacking. It's a little hard to talk about, while you're doing this. Also, because it's a big piece of dough, it's not a little one. Came up with actually starting to rise. I had a friend call and it was way out this way, so probably be here soon. So I'm going to go ahead and let the bread rise. We're going to wrap up the video and we're going to come back maybe later tonight, maybe even tomorrow. I have a little more time, so we'll see how this goes. A couple days anyway. And there we go. So I was also I wanted to make a little marijuana gingerbread. I thought the clove and a little bit would go good together. And I know that, it's controversial and not everybody agrees about it, but there are medicinal benefits for eating it. I have a friend who cures people of cancer with suppositories. The benefit of the suppository is it doesn't really make you high. It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier and you get all the oils. Well, it does cross it a bit, but it's not in the same way. So it's not, like the therapeutic effect would get you so high if you took it orally or smoked it. Well, you can't really smoke it to get the full benefit that way. But by the way, we're covering our dough. I put them into 2 lumps here. One here, other one is going to go on a plate or something. We're going to cover them up and we're going to let them rise. So the dough feels really nice right now. Let me show you the texture. I think let's see, the sun will come in and hit it. Maybe you can texture. Oh, let's see if I can. I don't know. It's not capturing properly. It looks so pretty a minute ago. You can see, I can kind of see and feel. It feels a little different when I think it's ready to the eyes, but it has this really I don't know. I like it though. It's a good feel. It gets this feel to it, and then it's going to come out good. So we're good. We're happy with it. We're going to throw our breads here. We're going to stick them over here where the wind's not going to blow on them too much. And throw a towel over them, preferably. Which the problem is we don't know where our towels are. At any rate, I will do this. Second, not be baking. I don't know when I'm going to bake this bread now because I have a friend coming out this way. So it may have to. It may be dough interrupted. I may have to freeze it. I don't know. We'll see. But then I'll do a second video on this channel with the bread, and then I'll put them together and upload them to Wake Up America. All right, guys, you have a great day. I'm going to go ahead and end this before I touch the camera, though, because I'm going to get too much oil on the old hands here. So this year, my kids are at their dad's, which is great. After their dad and I closed our cult back in our Pentecostal church cult back in it was only like 10 years ago. We did the whole ministry thing with the Pentecostal church for 10 years. Maybe I didn't say it loud enough. So my ex-husband and I, we were Pentecostal ministers for like 10 years, and we had a church, and so we closed that church back. Son Jacob died, and we ended up getting divorced. It was very the Christian church is not kind to women. Okay, I don't care what anybody says. It's not a good place, and it's not good for the children. I did things differently in the church where we did things a lot differently with the kids. In fact, when I was pregnant with twins and my son Jacob was the one who passed away, I was in the nursery the day that my water broke, and on the platform playing keyboard. I loved being in that nursery though. I always supervised those kids. It was very safe. But when we went back to the mothership, the mother church, when we closed ours down, they did not, and it ended up being very explosive that I left. And when I left, I actually created a website and a discussion board and triggered the whole church to fracture, shut the whole thing, turned a child molestation case over the DA's office, and was so hated in my town of origin. Not where we shut our church down. That's not where the problems were. It was the church we went to after we shut our church down. That one, their children's church pastor was molesting and sodomizing little kids. His name is Ryan Aldridge. He's in prison now, serving consecutive life sentences. But so they really hated me for turning the case in because I let the DA use my name when they did interviews to confirm information and whatnot, because I didn't think it would be, I was just figured it was going to help it. And so people knew who I had, so not only had I left the church, taken a bunch of people out with me who left, and I worked with people to get them out of the church for a while. It's very interesting, but so then the next 10 years, we got divorced. The church was real awful to the women. It was, real bad, really bad. And so the only way you could really help people get out is you have to have the husband leave first. Because if the wife left with the kids because of the abuse, the church pastor and the disciples, the men in the church, would help the man get a brand new wife, usually even a teenage wife, like an 18-year-old wife. sometimes in their early 20s, but what they would do is they'd arrange for a girl who'd been raised in the church, who didn't have any, who was just who was so awestruck by this older man, who'd been in the ministry and whatnot. They would have him marry him off, and they would watch all of their kids for them, and the people in the church would write letters, and so the woman would get, some of these women committed suicide, other ones became lesbians. It was really horrible. It's really horrible, beyond horrible. Things that go on to the women and children in the Christian church. No matter where I went in the last 10 years to visit churches to see if there was anything that didn't have that, I've yet to find a Christian church where I did not find a pedophile in that church, and I go by my gut, which hasn't been wrong yet. There's been a few times when I didn't know someone was a pedophile and they were. That was real surprising to me. Twice that happened. Michael Jackson and Mr. Hesse, my son's first grade teacher, who the year he had my son is the year he ended up getting busted for 30 years of pedophilia coincidentally that year. So that my son didn't get touched by him, but thank God. Those two men I didn't recognize. I didn't recognize it. But when I do think someone is, there's never been a time I've been wrong. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I haven't had it happen yet. And I've been to a Christian church, and I wouldn't pass judgment. I would wait, thinking I was wrong. And every time that I tried to visit one, there was a man in there who was either taking girls who were virgins, who were 12 and 13 years old, and raping them, essentially, finding ways to violate them, or children testing the children. There's someone who's sneaking in with the kids, somehow finding a way in. And the Christian pastors don't judge it. Women to keep it quiet. The situations are just horrible, if you ask me. I would not take my family to one of those churches in a million years. The one we were in was strict, and it was worse than most of them. So it's been 10 years we've been out. But where was I going with that? Sometimes my memory just doesn't serve me. Well, there was an end to that story. I don't remember what it was. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this little cleaning up, and then we're going to shut that video down, and I hope you have a really great Thanksgiving. What's the point of that? The kids. Making the churches, there was a reason. Yeah, the world will never know. Maybe I'll probably put the rest of that idea in there. All right, over and out.